Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of The Ultimate Client Strategy. We're very excited to have our guest today share her insights. She has some very unique parts of her practice, which she's going to share momentarily. But I'm Lisa Rosenthal, and this is my partner, Bruce Libman. And our guest today is Sarah Briguglio, who is an attorney. Bruce?
All right. But yeah, she's an attorney, but a very diversified practice. All right. And she will, one of the questions I wanted to ask you, Sarah, is at the beginning of this journey, what motivated you? All right. Not only to have a diversified practice, but in 4 states. All right. Which are New York, New Jersey, Florida, and Texas. All right. So, how did this all motivate you to get your journey done like this?
Sure, Bruce, that's an excellent question. And I will just say that I started my firm on the basis that I wanted a firm with very personalized, comprehensive service. Before I started my own business, I worked for other firms, and I felt the focus with a bigger firm was billing, very transactional, and I wanted to create an experience for my clients where I was their family lawyer. I was the one they would go to for any concern that they had, whether they were moving, whether they were having another child, whether they were looking to retire. I wanted to have really personalized service with expert knowledge, and I wanted to be able to help my clients significantly, with their legal planning and their circumstances.
So where was the first state that you took the bar?
Yeah.
Sure, great question. New Jersey. I graduated from Seton Hall Law, great law school, and I took the New Jersey bar.
What came after that? Which state came after?
New York, because it was just across the border.
And then,
And then I had to take the Florida bar. So Florida came after that. And then once I had Florida, I was like, I'm going to go for Texas now. And then Texas was the last state to come into the group.
and you have active clients in all those states.
Yes, I do.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
There's clearly, if you're from the Northeast, you know the migration that happens between New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, like all the northeastern states to Florida. And that migration is real, more so than ever. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about what that looks like.
Sure, that's a great question, Lisa. And I think people don't realize, understandably so, that once you cross a state lines, that the law can change significantly. And you want to make sure that your planning is in line with your current residency. For example, when you transition from New Jersey and New York to Florida, Florida has incredibly strong homestead protections. So your house, your homestead has protection from creditors. And additionally, there are tax benefits to having these homestead protections in place. So you want to make sure your estate plan is drafted properly, that you maintain that homestead eligibility, because it's very important for not only you, but your spouse or your minor children.
What do you think of Governor DeSantis's thought to put, removing property tax on the ballot in 2026?
Yes, I've heard of this. And while I tend to not comment on political matters, but I will say, I guess there are arguments for both sides. Some individuals will think this is attractive, not having property tax, right? Because that's a significant expense for homeowners. Other people will think, okay, what about Florida's school system? What's going to fund the schools and have a quality education system? So I guess there's arguments on both sides of the line. It just depends on which group you're in, if you feel it's advantageous or not.
So just so you know, we don't really talk about politics. We don't talk
Right.
about people in politics. So
Right.
I mentioned the governor because he's who's putting it up,
Yes,
right, currently. But we always talk about policy
sure.
and how the policy of lawmakers impacts our clients. So it's more, about the impact of what that might look like, not necessarily the political stance.
Oh, yes, absolutely. No, I can understand that, Lisa, and thank you for explaining that. It's just a disclaimer that I put before I speak to say I'm not
100%.
inserting myself.
Same thing. I
Yeah.
missed that.
Right, right. No, but that's a great point. How is that going to affect other people, right? And if you think about it, New Jersey has high property taxes relative to other states. And if people here, particularly young families, that there are opportunities to not have property tax, this may encourage more
Sure.
migration to Florida. So that's an impact.
Yeah, I mean, New York has some pretty high property tax as well, especially
Yes,
on
definitely.
Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk counties, and Westchester. Significant impact to affordability, and it's
Hmm.
a problem for younger people, even folks that you're helping plan for, right?
Hmm.
If they've accumulated some level of wealth, affluence, if they own property, it's the idea to leave it to your children even and turn it over. You know, when taxes are 30, 50 to $50,000 a year just in property tax,
Yes.
right? That child can't afford. So not only do you have to gift the house, you have to gift enough money to sustain the house through taxes, right?
Mhm.
So real estate is one of those aspects of your planning that I'm sure has changed drastically, right, in the last decade, or particularly since COVID, right?
Absolutely. And you're right. I have clients who don't want to burden their children with finding the money to pay for taxes, insurance, and maintenance fees, and that's a consideration with planning. And I will say this, there have been some developments after the One Big Beautiful Bill Act was passed too that affect my industry. For example, I do Medicaid planning, and there's supposed to be significant cuts over the long term with this program, and that does affect my clients' planning. There's also a cap on home equity in terms of the exemption for Medicaid planning. So that impacts my clients. And once you travel across state lines, I will say this, the Medicaid programs are very different, very, very different. So if you have somebody who's trying to qualify for Medicaid in assisted living versus a nursing home in New York or New Jersey or Florida, you're going to see some very different rules and you're going to need to see some different strategies. So that's why I would emphasize to people who are, looking to prepare for assisted living or long-term care is to do it earlier. Definitely do a proactive approach because of the changing landscape that we're experiencing.
Absolutely. And there are folks that don't qualify for long-term care insurance, and I've seen some incredibly creative planning done
Right.
through real estate
Hmm.
ownership, right? As a long-term care plan. I mean, there's so many different ways, but also long-term care insurance has become so exponentially expensive. Um, and then there's also reverse mortgage, right? I know folks that use reverse mortgage as part of a planning tool going forward. But I'm most curious
Hmm.
about the planning that you do for folks that live in multiple states. And that part of your story is really, it's interesting. There are not many, there are some, but there are not many attorneys. Usually we talk with folks that work with people, either in New York or they're in New York and they work with a Florida firm or vice
Right.
versa. But in your case, you are that person. So your perspective is holistic, and I love that.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And you'll see a difference with different states in terms of some states are marital property states and other states are community property states. And I'm barred in states with both. And for example, when someone passes away, a community property state has a double step up in basis as opposed to a marital property state where it's only half of that. So these are key considerations that it's very important to be aware of when you're doing estate planning. And if you're not in the industry, then you don't know these things. You don't know when you move that, hey, you could be missing out on significant tax advantages with a move if you don't plan properly.
And then, of course, there's the timing issue. What does it mean to be domiciled in a particular state? Maybe you can help folks understand, because I know New York actively will pursue people that claim, right, residency outside of the state, but really are still New York State residents. So we work with an attorney that actively helps people fight those cases. So maybe you can help folks understand a little bit more about what that looks like.
Yes, so definitely you run into issues establishing residency for certain states. And like you said, New York, after COVID, they definitely changed what they look at in terms of residency and taxes. People who work from home and don't necessarily spend all their time in New York, well, they could certainly be pursued for taxes. So you do have to watch and you have to look at multiple states' laws in terms of residency. Usually one state, will, if you can make it clear that your one state is your residency for tax purposes, and then you don't necessarily have to pay tax in that other state, but it really depends which states you're talking about. So, for example, a lot of states are okay, if you are there consistently for 6 months, that's your residency. But other states don't necessarily follow that model, and they look at different factors to establish what residency is and look at different documentation in terms of how do you establish, like, this is the place that you intend to remain. They'll look at maybe your driver's license, your voter registration, where your kids go to school. There's a number of factors that can be looked at in terms of residency.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Now, Sarah, I wanted to ask you because
Yes.
I know we're talking about some estate planning, but
Sure.
you're much more diversified than that. All right. So I'd like you to discuss some of the other values that your firm delivers on the law side.
Oh, absolutely. Right. So I do estate planning, but that is a broad subject. And within estate planning, I also do special needs planning and Medicaid planning. So special needs planning is very important because if you have a disabled child or a disabled family member, you want to make sure that that family member doesn't lose benefits. And they could with a personal injury settlement or an inheritance, it could jeopardize their benefits. So it's really important to plan for a special needs individual. And another reason it's very important is with IRAs, right? If somebody's inheriting an IRA, there is a distinction in the law when somebody is a special needs individual versus someone who isn't special needs in how long they can stretch between when they have to pay taxes on IRAs. So it's super important to make sure when you're dealing with a special needs individual that you do the proper planning in place for them.
And you also do estate administration too.
Yes, exactly. So I'm privileged to help families with estate administration where they're going through a really tough time because they lost a loved one, but I help guide them through the court process and make sure the filings are in place and that who the decedent intended to receive their assets receives their assets. So I try to make it as seamless and as possible and help my clients with this process.
And you're also very strong on the business planning side too.
Yes, yes. So with business planning, again, really important because I've seen situations where, okay, we're starting out, all well and good, we're excited for our business, and they didn't do any planning, and now there's a disagreement. How do you handle this disagreement? Or what happens if a partner or shareholder is incapacitated and who is going to step up and manage their end of the business? Or what happens if a key stakeholder or shareholder passes away? What if the other business partner doesn't want to work with that partner's spouse, right? So these are all key considerations with business planning that tie into estate planning in general.
You mean every business partner doesn't want to work with their partner's spouse? I would think that that's exactly what they want to do.
Right, right.
There are so many parts and pieces. Bruce and I were having this discussion earlier today with a client about, scale. How do you scale your business and the considerations that an entrepreneur really needs and what that really looks like. And in just about every one of these conversations that we're having, I think entrepreneurship comes to the surface in so many ways. And in your case, look how many areas, not just of practice, but they all tie together.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's somebody who is not a business owner might turn around and here all the areas of practice you're in, but ultimately they all tied together.
Yes, exactly, Lisa, right.
Because protecting the business, protecting your family, protecting income, right, and assets, it's all the same. And what makes it different are the laws and regulations you're governed by depending on what state you live in. So being barred in all four of those states really lets you do comprehensive planning for folks.
Absolutely, Lisa. Couldn't have said it better myself.
So, Sarah, just one more question for you.
Sure.
What's one of the most impactful things that have happened in your life? And how did it direct you? What did it change in your direction?
Wow, that's a deep question. And I can definitely
is.
say
It is.
there have definitely been more than one impactful moment in my life, but I'm happy to focus on and one or two. And I will say this, why I got into this area. So there was someone I know who passed away, and this is before I got into this area, and there wasn't planning done. And it was very sad because there was arguments among the siblings and the surviving spouse about, for example, something as who is going to get, mom's jewelry, right? And it's heartbreaking to see that that could have been prevented, right? If there was a plan in place, or if there was clearly identified who got what, or a method for identifying who got what, this wouldn't have created a schism, in the family dynamics. And, you know, I understand that money can change things for a family, but you can prevent arguments and fights and breaking up of the family, with some simple planning. So that's what really motivated me to get into this area because I saw the heartbreak, and it's something that's simple to prevent just with a bit of being proactive and planning.
Sometimes it's not just the money.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's the sentimental value of that piece of jewelry,
Absolutely.
or you know, even when there is planning, how come mom left it to this one and not that one? And I happen to be blessed that my parents have been planners,
Hmm.
um, and thank God they're still both with us. But from the very first time they did an estate plan, I was in my early 20s,
Oh, wow.
and then again in my 30s, and then in my 50s when they moved, and all the different iterations of what they did. There was always a family dinner without spouses or grandchildren. So it was the five of us are going to sit down and have dinner together and a conversation. So after the first time, my sister and brother and I, we kind of knew what was coming. Like, all right, they changed things. And we're very fortunate and blessed that all three of us have said, spend every penny you have, go see the world, do everything, don't leave it for us. Like, just go and do. And so when you have open communication for planning, I think it gives a lot of peace of mind to the folks that are left behind when
Hmm.
people pass, because the wishes were known. It was all discussed. There's no wondering. You're not left with these questions of, oh, I wonder what they would have done had this happened or that. Like, it's all discussed. And then there's no infighting because we happen to get along. So it's okay. I can imagine when siblings don't get along, but we all know what their wishes are, regardless of what they did, whether we agree with it or not. We know what they asked of us. We know what's going to happen.
Yeah, Lisa, that's a great point. And that's actually one of my missions as an estate planning lawyer is to encourage open communication with the family and be a family lawyer. Like, I want to help you, I want to help your spouse, I want to help your kids. And like you said, knowing the reasons why something is done is really helpful for the family. And like you said, there is sentimental reasons.
Yeah.
Perhaps maybe one child wanted a certain piece of jewelry because they had a memory when mom bought that piece of jewelry, or they're about to get married, one child's about to get married, and their mom had it at the wedding and it's significant to them. So if you understand these reasons why certain things are done and communicate openly, that does solve a lot of problems. I really agree with you, Lisa.
And then we were able to have kind of the, not disagreements, but we were able to flush out some of the things that all three of us didn't agree with that they
Hmm.
were going to do. And we
Right.
had the opportunity to talk it through and kind of flush it out while they're sitting in front of us instead of having to figure it out later. So I think it's good for everyone involved.
Mhm.
One of us has a very hard time with the conversation in general. That's
Mhm.
hard for them, but it made it easier because we were all talking about it together and they were not by themselves with their spouse trying to process what was happening, right? We
Exactly.
answered questions so I think just from a family planning perspective,
Mhm.
it's one of the gifts you give back with the profession you're in and what you do. And of course, the special needs planning and the business planning as it pertains to the family. Both of my parents had businesses. My
Yeah.
dad still does. And the three of us are trying to help him deal with it now so that we don't have to deal with it later. But, sometimes they're open to suggestions, sometimes not. But I think it's great because you and I would be able to help him understand, right? My siblings and I and you and them could talk and it doesn't come from the siblings anymore. Now it comes from the attorney.
Right.
Says this is how your business is going to impact your estate planning, right? This
Mhm.
is what we've done here and this is how we need to protect this. So I think it's certainly critically important and I think you approach it from a perspective that is so unique.
Thank you, Lisa. I agree. It is critically important. And like you said, one thing affects the other, right? Your estate planning at the individual level affects your business planning. So it's important that those two intersect. And having that perspective is a great approach to planning. And I felt, you know, being a lawyer in this area, it was super important to not just do an estate plan with my clients and then the client just puts it in a drawer and forgets about it. Like I
Yeah.
want to be there where there are changes through my client's life and I can help them with those changes. And even if it's a question that I don't know, maybe it's a financial question that I don't deal with, then I know who to refer them to, right? So I want to be that point person for my clients. I've heard of other firms and experienced where, okay, they just do the estate plan and the client puts it in a drawer and then it's not looked at again. But it's super important to navigate with your estate plan at different stages of your life and also to update. Take a look at it every 3 years. Maybe the law has changed. Like you see with each administration, right? There's changes in laws,
Right.
there's changes in
Yeah.
policy. So it's important to revisit these things and not just look at it once and, forget about it.
And that's why we talk about policy and not politics, because
That's right.
policy changes all the time, impacts all of us in a variety of ways.
Hmm.
Administrations come and go and they leave behind all kinds of things for us to deal with.
Right.
So, Sarah, what else do you want people to know about you? What haven't we covered? And it could be anything.
Yeah, great. I think you did a amazing overview, Lisa. These are really smart questions, and you too, Bruce, really gave a sense of who I am as a lawyer and what I'm trying to accomplish and my areas of expertise. But I'll just say this, just to give you a sense of overall who I am, is I want to create peace for my clients. I want them to be able to rest their head at night, knowing things are taken care of, and that if they have any question or concern, that they can go to me. And I also want them to know that they're not going to be nickel and dimed when they call me. Like, unlike larger firms, like I stick with a flat fee for my estate planning. So they're going to know when they talk to me, it's not going to be a billable question. So I'm always available. I want to do the right thing for my client and their families, and I'm there if they need me.
Well, you certainly do the right thing by our colleagues, and you're a wonderful asset in our world. So we're happy to have you. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time and sharing your story and more about what you do and how you do.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Lisa and Bruce. It's been a pleasure knowing you, working with you, and ARG is a great organization with a lot of great professionals. So I'm very happy to be a part of it.